Okay, welcome back. We're still continuing on with option 2, where you're going to represent the owner's interest in finding or securing a tenant for the property. Remember, it is not your responsibility or obligation to actually approve that tenant. It is totally up to the landlord, which we will be talking about in this training. It is important for you to know that it is your obligation to complete the paperwork or all paperwork if applicable. On this slide you will see 19 individual forms. Any or all of these forms could be involved in leasing a property for the benefit of the landlord. It's real simple. You always have to have information about brokerage services. And of course you need a residential real estate listing agreement exclusive right to lease. If it's a condominium, you need a condominium addendum, intermediary relationship, notice if we find a tenant within the Century 21 Judge Fight Company. We need an addendum to regarding lead-based paint if the property was built prior to 1978, just like you do on a property for sale. You need the information about flood hazard areas. You need a key box authorization. You need, that's by the way by the tenant, when the property is ready for releasing to someone else, we need the tenant to sign a key box authorization for the end of their lease so the landlord doesn't have any vacancies. You need a W-9 form. How many of you have ever had a landlord or tenant sign a W-9 form? You need a pool spa maintenance addendum. Who's going to be responsible for that pool or spa? Very, very, very important in regard to a rental property with a pool or a spa. The pet agreement, critical in today's society. There are a lot of pets that insurance companies do not allow in rental properties. And I say don't allow, it's a landlord that allows them, but the insurance restricts liability, or actually will not allow or not pay on dog bites from some of these pets of a vicious nature. The residential lease inventory and condition form, the agreement for application, deposit, and hold on property, and then the residential lease guarantee form. What is that? Well, if someone is co-signing a lease but not living in the property, for instance, maybe a student is moving in, they're going to college and their parents are signing the lease, that requires a residential lease guarantee form on that particular lease. The agreement between brokers for residential leases, the residential lease application, the residential lease itself, and property tax records to lease CMA for support pricing. The NETRIS, residential lease property data input form, all have to be completed. So any and all of these forms are applicable on a lease. So don't just think, oh gee, all I have to do is find a tenant and I'm done. These are very, very critical. Remember, secure all files. What things do you need to do to protect the interest and market this property? Well, here's a list of them. You need to take a minimum of 10 photographs for use in MLS. Of course, you can put up to 25 in there, but minimum of 10 photos for use in MLS. You must measure all rooms, just like it was a property for sale. Don't get caught up because other agents are not professional and they don't do it, that you don't have to be professional either. You have an obligation to do the best you can do to get this property leased in the shortest period of time for the landlord. You need to get an extra set of keys for the key box. You need to get the security codes if there's an alarm. You need to get showing instructions from the landlord and coordinate if the property is tenant occupied with that tenant. You need to coordinate with them. The agent, and remember the key box authorization if there's a tenant in the property as well. The agent must install a for lease sign if approved by the landlord and the HOA. Notice in the red box here it says many HOAs do not allow for lease signs. They'll allow for sale signs. Many require special specific signs with colors, etc. And just for your information, if you've never dealt with one of these HOAs, these specialty signs could cost up to $150 each. They require that they are bought from a specific sign company. These HOAs are very, very, very specific in these rules. You need to confirm the rules with the HOA before the listing the property for lease. Some HOAs don't even allow for a property to be leased. So make sure that you know these HOA rules before you take a property for lease. The agent must verify the owner of record is current on their mortgage. You need to be warned ahead of time of potential foreclosure. Let me assure you, this is experience talking. You do not want to put a tenant in there. The tenant pays their rent to the owner. 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, the tenant or the landlord just keeps the money, doesn't pay the mortgage, and all of a sudden the tenant is put out on the street or contacted by the lender that the property has been foreclosed. Guess who they call? They call you. They call me. We do not want to be a party to that. Things happen after we lease properties we don't know about, but this is very, very important, especially based on the last 5 years of what's gone on in the real estate market. Agent must secure keys and garage door openers. Yes, garage door openers, that's something a lot of people overlook, and all of a sudden the tenant moves in, where are the garage door openers? And the landlord has moved to Timbuktu. The garage door openers are locked in a box somewhere in a storage unit, or they're en route in a moving van. You need to determine the lease requirements from the landlord, whatever those might be. You protect the investment of the landlord. They are your client. And I want you to know that the biggest cost to a landlord is frequent move in and move out of tenants. The longer the lease, the better the tenant, the better the investment. That's the way property management works as an investment. Below you see some requirements that are on the data input form. I want you to pay particular attention to these lease requirements on the data input form. It has a place for an application fee, if it has to be approved by the HOA, credit report, prior residence information, required. I'm not going to read all these to you. You get the idea. Notice on the right hand side under restrictions, the pet restrictions, whether you can lease it while it's on the market. No water beds. Some people won't allow water beds in their properties. No smoking in the property. These things are very important to landlords, and we need to make sure that we have protected the interest of the client. Of course, is a 1 year plus lease. Is there government subsidy considered? Lease purchase option. Remember, you cannot write a lease option. Remember, you cannot write a lease purchase. An attorney has to draw up those documents. A month-to-month lease, which is, by the way, the worst kind. Read the red border up above. The 6-month, yearly, or other. Money's required. First month's rent, last month's rent, pet deposit, security deposit, waterbed deposit, other. How many of you ever thought of a waterbed deposit? Well, guess what? Property managers, this is a way of life for them. You need to be aware of these restrictions. Okay, it's time for another quiz. Let's take a minute and learn about or remember what we've just learned and how to protect the investment of our clients.